Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Devil's Own podcast. I'm joined this evening by Asa. Evening, Asa. How are you?
Evening, Bradley. I'm doing well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Busy week. So let's start with Colin's been announced as our permanent head coach with Julian Gray as his assistant. Happy with that one?
Yeah, definitely. I think he deserves an opportunity to take the side into next season after sort of completing the job he came in to do. I think it's definitely the right decision moving forward. I think this is a long-term project, definitely around building a culture, an identity, and really being able to add on to it season on season. So I'm really excited to see what comes with it next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, look, I watched his interview with the club the day after he was announced. I think he certainly says all the things as a fan you sort of want to hear. And I think it was evident in that interview the effect those sort of 7 games had in terms of building that bond with the fans. He actually seemed sort of really excited to sort of continue and to be with the fans again.
100%. I think he seems very driven, passionate. I think he sort of, I think Julian touched on it actually, like the family-orientated club, and he really wants to get involved in the community, and it was just, everything was positive. But obviously, let's get to work, pre-season, bringing in the players he wants, and sort of time will tell, really.
Absolutely, and I think that we definitely saw some signs of what his style will be. I think it was very much kind of back to basics. Very, I don't want to say simple football, but in terms of what we were doing over those 7 games, it was a lot more basic, not quite as complex as maybe some of the stuff we tried to do under Scott Lindsay. So I think there's probably going to be a more attack-minded, forward-thinking sort of lineup. Obviously, a bit like Scott when he came back last year, the players that we've got are the players that we've got, and you've got to kind of try and utilise those to get the results to keep us in whatever division it may be. But I'm really excited to see where it goes, and hopefully the signings come thick and fast. And even last day of the season, I know obviously we spoke to Colin outside the ground before the game. He was with his family and his children, so it's felt like a club where he wants to be, and feels like he fits.
Definitely, I think you sort of touched on one of your earlier points about we're gonna see something very different to what we saw in those last 7 games. I think what he did do very well was actually come in and not try to implement sort of a real detailed tactics, but actually really brought it back to basics. Got the players really fighting for the badge, and I think that's what he had to do essentially, because within the short time frame he wouldn't have been able to really instill a style of play. And I think he even touched on it in his final, in the post-Salford interview. He says, "You'll never see my team play like that again." So we're definitely going to see something different. But I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. Good. So with that in mind, obviously Colin was announced. There was prior to Colin being announced, there was a little bit doing the rounds in terms of maybe some outgoings. We'll get to those in a minute. But obviously the retained list and the under contract list are now out. I thought, first and foremost, let's go through the players the club have identified as currently in discussion. So there's 6 players there. One is Jojo Wallacott. So Jojo played 6 games for us this season. I think it's probably fair to say was understudy to Harvey Davies in the first sort of half of the season. And there were even times early on in the season where he wasn't even on the bench. We just had Harvey in goal, and there was an incident where Harvey dislocated a finger, I think, and had to sort of see out the rest of the game. So I personally, I really like Jojo, and I've spoken to him a few times. I thought he looked a good keeper last year in stages and at times. But I was surprised to see he's one that's in discussion, because I assumed he would be going. Whether it's his choice or not, he lost the kind of number 1 shirt this season, ended up being number 34. It certainly looked like through pre-season stuff that he wasn't going to be around the club. So I was sort of expecting him to go maybe in January. He didn't go, and then towards the end of the season. I mean, are you surprised they're talking to him, or you
No,
know?
I think I am surprised. I think more the fact that obviously he was second choice goalkeeper for last season, and ultimately he's at a stage of his career where he wants to be playing regular minutes. He wants to be at a club where he can settle down, and obviously I think if they're in talks with him, they're obviously weighing up whether he might be a first choice goalkeeper next season. Obviously we're still going to be in the market for another keeper, because obviously Chapman went back to his parent club, so we have only got one keeper at the club, so we are going to be in the market for another keeper. So maybe they're using him as a sort of reserve backup option.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, for me, it's a bit of a strange one. When he came into the club when we were in League One, he was regularly in the Ghana squad. I don't think he is at the moment. Obviously, Ghana are in England's group in the World Cup. I'm assuming there's probably, when you bring in a goalkeeper like Harvey Davies on loan from Liverpool, there's probably some clause in the loan contract that if he's fit, he plays. Because they want him to get the minutes. Obviously, Jojo only came in when Harvey got injured, and then Jacob came in. And to be fair to Jacob, didn't put a foot wrong, really. Once you've got the shirt, it's yours to kind of lose to a certain degree. So, I mean, look, we'll see where it goes. I'm with you. Obviously, we'll touch on it now. Will Heater, young goalkeeper that came through the programme at the club, has obviously been released. So, we are now down to no goalkeepers if Jojo doesn't re-sign. That said, yes, I think everyone sees that we need someone to come in and do a job there. The next one in discussion is Josh Flint. So Josh made, believe it or not, 30 appearances this season. All starts, played the best part of 3,000 minutes, 1 goal, 2 assists. I like Josh Flint. I think he's a great defender. I know that post Swansea game, when I spoke to Scott Lindsay at the service station, there were clubs circling last summer for Josh, and the club are actively trying not to sell him. Don't think he had his best season, right? The club didn't have their greatest season. I'm pleased that he's in discussions. I really do hope he stays. I just think, is he maybe going to see his future at a slightly higher level, maybe? What do you think on Josh?
Look, I think in that in the games he played, he was one of our biggest attacking threats, really. But I think he's a top quality player. I agree with you. He hasn't necessarily had his best season. Obviously, he picked up with that injury sort of February time. But he's definitely one I love to see stay on. I think that's probably where we have the most sort of options in that sort of centre-back role, that defensive role. Where he fits in under Colin, I'm not sure, because obviously depending on what sort of formation he goes with. I'd definitely be happy to see him stay on. I think he's a top quality player.
Super. Similarly, Scott Malone obviously came back in. I don't think Scott Malone anticipated getting as much football as he got towards the end of the season. Bless him. He worked his socks off tirelessly every game, put his body on the line, and maybe at times, it felt like we were maybe sticking him back together with a bit of sellotape and sort of sending him out there. But For me, I think he's a great one to have around the club. I think there's that old saying of like he's a great one to have in the dressing room. I think if you look at the squad, it's quite a young squad. There's not many old heads in there. Bit like a couple of years ago when we had sort of Ben Gladwin on that kind of cusp of player coaching. I would keep Scott around. I think he's a great squad player and a great guy to have around the club.
100%. I think even if he does take more of a coaching role next season, even if he doesn't sort of play as many minutes, as you'd expect, I definitely see him potentially being that player coach, but definitely someone to stick around, because even if he isn't maybe playing as much, as many minutes, he's still someone that can impact from the sidelines for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the other thing is if we start playing sort of how we're anticipating Colin's style's going to be, which is a little bit more attack minded and stuff, Scott could be a great option if we're trying to defend a lead to come on at 60 minutes and sort of bring a bit of steel into the back line. So I think, for me, no brainer. Harry Forster, so didn't play too much at the start of the season, was sort of on the fringes a bit. Played a bit more under Colin towards the end of the season. We were obviously starting to run really short of players at that point. And he was playing quite a strange role at times, Harry Forster. He was sort of a 10 in front of Adiemo, who had dropped back in to be the right wing back at times, right? So I was never quite sure where he was playing. But I like Harry. I think he's a very popular person around the club. You hear a lot of the ladies definitely like Harry and his hair, don't they? You hear definitely a lot of comments about that. But he's always got time for the fans, so I think it'd be great to see him extend his stay at the club and hopefully be able to kind of kick on a little bit more. But Colin obviously saw something in him towards the end of the season.
Definitely, I think he was probably one of our most important, probably one of our best attacking outlets in that run-in. I thought he provided most of our attacking threat. I like Harry a lot. I think he maybe hasn't had that consistency, playing week in and week out, sort of starting. But he's definitely a great person even to bring off the bench to impact a game. I think he really adds an energy and a pace to the game.
And he's incredibly versatile. I mean, I think I've seen him play just about everywhere on the pitch. But like you say, I suppose he's coming into what this would be his third or fourth season with the club next year. He's not been able to kind of nail down that starting berth necessarily. I suppose he's got to look at it as well as the club and decide where his future lies. But yeah, I'd love to see him stay. I think he's a great guy. Taylor Richards obviously came in January. I think we saw flashes of what Taylor can do. Again, another one that didn't quite nail down a starting position regularly. He was a little bit sort of in and out the team. I felt he was a bit unlucky really, because he came in at the start of the window, played a bit, then Lolos Darcy came back in and sort of filled those 10 roles. He dropped a bit deeper. I didn't think that suited him. But I really like him, and he definitely influences the game, and he's someone that will take a shot from outside the box.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think we haven't seen the best of Taylor Richards yet. As you touched on, he's had to play a bit more of a deeper role at times with sort of injuries to the midfield. So we haven't seen him in his best position. But he just has that bit of finishing, that bit of quality, that final product. He's a match winner really. I think he's one of the few match winners in the squad who can definitely just pull something out of the bag when you need it. And obviously, we saw it on a few occasions. Gillingham,
Barrow.
So definitely a player to keep our eye on for next season.
Even the Barnet game. I think the Barnet game was his debut, and he looked really lively. He looked like at that stage what we'd been missing over the first half of the season: a bit of creativity, a bit of quality in the final third. So yeah, fingers crossed he stays. The next one is a little too close to your heart because I can see his shirt sat next to you right there. Mr. Louis Watson is in discussion to stay at the club. Now, I'm a big fan of Louis. I think he's great. I thought he looked really good last year. The back end of last year when he came in, back end of League One, he looked really good. He got injured at the start of the season. He was out the team for a while. He then sort of struggled to get going again, but then was really, really crucial in the kind of running towards the end of the season, popping up with a goal and sort of creating in that final third position. Obviously, I'm guessing you would like Louis to stay at the club.
I think that's a no-brainer, really, isn't it, Louis Watson? Yeah, no, I think I'm so glad to see that sort of Colin put a bit of faith in him. He didn't really get much game time under Scott Lindsay this season, but I'm glad Colin put some faith in him, and I think he did show what he's capable of. I think he's great in the tight areas, in the pockets. He's able to find those really sort of real good attacking positions to sort of really impact the game. And I think the more Crawley get Louis Watson on the ball, the more sort of threatening they look. So hopefully he's one that stays on next season. I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but
I can give you some stats of Louis Watson if you'd like them. We got 26 points this season with Louis Watson in the team, an average of 1.04 a game. Without him, we averaged 0.62. So when Watson played, he yielded 67% of our points from 54% of the games. So, you know, he missed a lot of football from the 6th of September until the start of November. And then he was out of the team he didn't play between Barnet and towards then coming back into the Newport game. I think going back to what you were saying about Louis is similar to how I felt about Louis Copley. You can see there's quality there in terms of the way they collect a ball, turn with a ball. They just sort of, you can tell their upbringing maybe is a little bit different to maybe some of the guys that we've signed in the past that come through non-league a different way. You know, you can see it's ingrained in them from when they were young. Look, I really like Louis, and I think in the 10, I think he's most effective. And I find it quite exciting to think of him playing a ball through for Orsi to run onto, because I think, you know, we all know from the promotion season that's where Orsi is at his best, is running onto things, not necessarily dropping back in to be the 10. So that would be quite an exciting proposition, I think, if you had maybe Watson and Richards potentially behind sort of an Orsi and then running beyond him as well.
yeah, definitely. I think if you play with two tens with sort of Orsi as striker, I think it allows Watson to actually be more of a free roam player where he can sort of drift around the pitch and not necessarily restricted to a sort of a rigid structure and a rigid position. And I think that's where he's sort of most effective, where he can sort of drift around the pitch, pick up those different areas that he can expose.
Yeah.
So
More of a three role sort of type player. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So then we move on to the release players. So we've obviously touched on Will Heaters has gone out. Louis Flower leaves. It's a shame because I think there's probably a player in Louis Flower. There was definitely moments of kind of quality. Just didn't quite get on the sort of goal scoring run. And, you know, a couple of goals and assist, and then out on loan to Woking. Seems to have had injury problems throughout his career that maybe sort of followed him a bit. Obviously, we gave him an opportunity and it's not worked out. You disappointed to see Louis Flower move on?
Look, I think it's a bit of a tricky one because we haven't really had that much to go off in terms of Flower. Obviously, he had that little bit of a run where he sort of picked up a little bit of form, then got injured. So we haven't really seen much of him, but I don't think he's a player that could necessarily lead the line for us. He's not a sort of player that could get, 15 plus goals a season.
Well, Scott sort of had him in that sort of inside forward role, didn't he? Coming in from the outside, which I didn't feel was necessarily his sort of best position. Maybe he's better in a pairing. Almost, it comes to mind, not because he was his manager at Woking, but sort of Defoe-esque a little bit more, playing with like a Peter Crouch type where you've got a sort of little man, big man. But I hope he sort of manages to shake off the injuries and sort of build a career for himself, because I think he was definitely highly rated at one stage in his career. Anthony Papadopoulos. Oh yeah, somewhere in there is a variation of those letters. The very limited football I saw of him in a Crawley shirt tended to be in the Virtue Trophy, where we tend to put out our second string. I thought, at times he looked decent. I thought it was unfair maybe for him to come in and get chucked into a League One game last season where we were struggling. That was a big step up. Thought we might see a bit more of him this season. Just didn't really kind of work out. Obviously, a couple of loan spells. Seems to be doing quite a good job of building his sort of fitness brand and his app and stuff. So everyone's got to have an income, right? So sort of wish him all the best. I mean, he was always friendly. He was always a great guy around the place. But just don't think we ever really saw enough to judge him, did we, Asa?
He just never really broke into the squad. I mean, obviously he had those good loan spells at Maidstone and I think most recently at Chelmsford. But yeah, he just never... I think there was one chance he had to get back into the side and really prove something. And that was around New Year's Day, where we played Charlton in League One. And the game got called off. I think that was at a time where we had a lot of injuries and they recalled him to sort of make up the numbers a little bit. And it would have sort of given him a chance to prove something, but it just wasn't to be. And I think that was his chance missed, really, to sort of prove what he could be at the squad. But I think this is the right decision for both the player himself and the club, because he's getting to a stage in his career, I think he's 24 now, where he needs to start playing regular minutes.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, I think wish him well in whatever he does next.
Reece Brown. I listen. I don't want to be negative about anyone. From the first moment in League Two, first home game of the season, I just thought he's way too lightweight for League Two. It was a strange one because I know he sort of another one of those that's kind of bounced around the Football League, then has gone out. I think he was at Forest Green last year. Didn't really set the world alight there, so I thought it was a bit of a strange move. A couple of goals, but there were times where you thought you could have had more. You could do more. Like I say, for me anyway, I thought he was very lightweight, and then once the January shopping spree took hold, we never saw Reece Brown again.
Yeah, no, I think the season before he joined us, he hadn't played a whole season of football. So he missed the whole season of football before joining us, and I think he just never ever got up to the speed that was necessary at League Two. He couldn't match the sort of physicality of League Two. So yeah, he just never really got going. Yeah, I agree. It was a bit of a strange one to bring him in, but I think he previously worked with Scott Lindsay at Forest Green.
Okay.
Somewhere along the line. But yeah, we didn't see him again. He sort of disappeared.
Then Theo Vassell. I was quite surprised by this one, if I'm honest, because he came in, he played on the left of a back three on his debut, and I thought he looked decidedly average and was quite worried about him. He then moved into the centre, and do you know what? He looked at a player, right? He just wanted to head everything. He wanted to defend everything, which we didn't have necessarily in the first half of the season without him. It was unfortunate he got injured, but it was kind of inevitable because he'd gone from playing no football to, because of our problems with injuries and players, he was thrown in and asked to play so many games in such a short space of time that I guess a muscle injury was inevitable.
I think he was sort of up there with one of my sort of slight surprises in terms of maybe not getting a new contract, but when you look at it actually from the bigger picture, Colin hasn't been able to see him play. He also, I think he's obviously has spent the majority of his time like rehabilitating, so they haven't been able to really maybe had any conversations or build any sort of connection or relationships, which maybe could have impacted sort of the decision not to keep him on. But he definitely.
And that said, it just because he's released now doesn't necessarily mean that in a couple of months they don't take another look at him, or for all we know, he could still be training with the club. We're still helping with his rehabilitation, and then when he's fit, we can sort of look at that again. But do you want to put money into that right now and potentially a squad position when there's no guarantee when he will be fit again right now?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, I think it's a logical decision. I think when I last spoke to him, he actually said that he will miss the start of next season, so he's going to miss the whole of pre-season and start next season. So it'd be hard for him to then get back into the squad anyway. Yeah, so it's a long road to recovery for him. So obviously that's made a big sort of impact on the decision. But it is a shame because I thought he looked like a proper defender, knows how to defend the box, no nonsense, big aerial threat. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I think it was just inevitable that it was, unfortunately, just played so much football too quickly, having not played any for quite a prolonged period of time. Whereas, someone like a Taylor Richard, similar, hadn't played a huge amount of football, but we were able to kind of put him in and out the team and sort of rest him a little bit and kind of keep him fresh. As evident by the fact when we got to the end of the season, obviously Scott Malone, who's predominantly a fullback, was filling in at centre back for us. So the next one I'll go for Harry McCurdy. Now, Harry McCurdy announced his departure from the club whilst most of us were queuing up to get into the end of season kit sale, and had decided that it would be best to fire a parting shot across the bows by saying he had met some lovely people and some wrong-uns, followed up by thought I deserved more than a 37-second phone call. Thought about it while I was in that queue. it doesn't take much longer than 37 seconds to say to somebody, thanks for everything you've done, but we're not going to offer you a contract, right? You don't, you're not going to, I don't understand how he saw that going. I have really, really mixed feelings on this, because when he came in at the start of the season, I thought he was listen, Harry is a very eccentric chap, and that is what makes Harry Harry, right? And I love that about him. He's not your stereotypical footballer. He doesn't come in with his Louis Vuitton wash bag. He's got his hat on backwards. He's pink diamond socks on, and I love it, right? I love all of that. He started the season, and I think he got off to a really rocky start with the fans, because the fans were quite critical of him, particularly at Swansea. I remember him getting booed when he was playing wing back. And I didn't like that, because he was clearly doing a job because we didn't have anyone to do it, right? And he's gone, I can do that, that's fine. And then he's got booed. That was disappointing. Maybe set the tone a little bit for him with some of the fans. Felt like he sort of did have a bit of a grudge with the fans. There was some issues at times. Listen, he was our top scorer last season. Was he clinical? Absolutely not. Would he have played as much football towards the end of the season if Orsi hadn't got injured? I'm not convinced of that either. I don't know. He's a very particular style of footballer, and I wonder if that's not going to fit into the kind of Colin system. So actually, yes, he might feel a bit aggrieved, but actually he's Crawley's top scorer from last season, available on a free transfer. Surely someone in League Two would take a punt, I would have thought.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you, really. Mixed, a bit on the fence with this one. Yeah, yes, he was our top goal scorer, but he scored nowhere near enough goals for us. He wasn't clinical. I think he had sort of a shot conversion rate of about 10%, whereas many of the sort of top goal scorers in League Two hit about 20. I think he's also a very injury-prone player as well.
Yeah.
These last few seasons, he hasn't played much. Obviously,
might help if he wore shin pads, Asa.
Well, yeah, maybe that was the
instead of napkins in his socks.
So, yeah, I think, injury-prone player. Obviously struggled with his injuries this season as well. I also think I'm not the biggest fan of his temperament on the pitch, and I think maybe that carried into the dressing room behind the scenes, and doesn't really maybe suit the culture that Colin's trying to build, potentially. I don't know.
Newport away, he was very lucky not to get sent off. Then I understand from people that were there, including yourself, he was then sort of pulled away because it kind of carried on afterwards. Felt like he had a bit of a grudge with the fans that day as well, although he scored the 2 goals. It sort of felt a bit narky towards the fans when he was celebrating. And so, I mean, look, thanks, Harry. Ultimately, you scored the goals that no one else did this season. But, you know, he can go and worry about upping the Chelsea now, because that's how he signs off every single Instagram post, isn't it? And then I think the one that surprised people the most was Max Anderson. I was quite surprised, and I also wasn't that surprised. The more I think back about it now, obviously, you know, we do the stuff before the games, we hang around where the players come in. I'm sure I've heard him make mention of sort of wanting to kind of go back to Scotland, maybe, or at least get nearer to Scotland. So in that regard, I wasn't surprised. And obviously, when he came into a League One football club. Stayed with us when we went down, maybe because there wasn't offers for him necessarily. Whether it was last year, whether it was this year, he's always been one of those players that's a bit in and out the team, isn't he? I mean, he came back from breaking his leg in about 5 minutes. So he obviously heals like the Hulk or something, which is incredible. I mean, didn't he play an entire half of football with a broken heel or something?
Yeah, I'm not. Was it the? I think it was. He came back from injury. He then played in that Harrogate win, and he scored a goal. Came off at half time,
That's
and I
right.
think, yeah, I think that might have been that match potentially. Yeah.
So look, I was disappointed to see him go. I think when you dig into it a bit more, there's a bit more behind the scenes. So it's in the public, right? So let's discuss it. Preston Johnson has put on Twitter that there was a option for the club to take up another year on Max's contract. The club have chosen not to do that. Whether that is because Max has said, "Please don't, I want to move on," or the club have said, "We don't see a future for you here." Not everybody's as vocal as Harry McCurdy, obviously, in terms of letting us know what's going on, and that's fine. I think what surprised me was that they didn't take up the option. From what Preston's saying, the wages were not huge on Max before the option, or even if we kind of took up the option. And then I know Preston threw some stats out there. I've got some here as well. So with Max Anderson this season, in 18 games, we got 22 points, an average of 1.22 points per game. 6 wins, 4 draws, and 8 losses. And those 6 wins, when you consider, I think we only had about 12 all season, didn't we? Is pretty good going. Without him in the side, that points per game halves. It goes to 0.61. So actually, in terms of that sort of, I suppose, professionalism, solidity that he gave us in midfield, whatever it may be, obviously the team is better with him in it statistically. How surprised are you to see him go?
I'm quite surprised in the respect of what he brought to the team. I'm surprised you let that sort of calibre of player go. I thought what he brought to the midfield was something quite different. He operated more as a box-to-box midfielder, so he was
more of a 6.
Yeah, he brought in, he chipped in with some goals and got some assists, but also did like the defensive side very well and was very solid. So he definitely has sort of that all round. He kept the ball ticking midfield. But obviously we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Did he want to return back to Scotland? We don't know. But could they have sort of exercised that option in his contract and still let him go, but could have got a bit of money for him? We don't know. Those things we won't know about. Definitely one I'm sad to sort of see go, because I think also he had, out of all our midfielders this season, he had the best pass completion rate. He had 85% pass completion rate from open play.
Cool head, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a, yeah. So, like I said to you, similar to sort of Scott Malone, I think there were times, probably more under Scott, where he would come into a game that we were trying to maybe get a result out of, whether it be a draw and we were starting to lose a bit of control of the game. He would come on and sort of manage to do that. So I wish all of them the best, all those players that are moving on. Ultimately, they did the job that they were brought in to do, which was keep us in the Football League. Obviously, loan players sort of heading back now. Lolos, Darcy have been made publicly available for transfer. I'd be surprised if we made a move for them, given that they didn't feature for Colin at all. The one I did want to touch on was Badrami, so he's out of contract at Burton. Similar to what you were saying earlier with Theo, he didn't really get much game time under Colin because of injury. Is he someone you would potentially take a punt on a free transfer?
Free transfer, I think maybe you're pushing more towards potentially bringing him in. But again, I don't think it happens. Colin, he didn't play under Colin because he was injured. I think, unfortunately, we sort of saw him play more of a centre back role in the defensive unit, which wasn't his best position. His best position was sort of in midfield, but then also playing alongside Jay Williams, they were two very similar players, so it sort of didn't give us that sort of different dynamic in midfield. So I don't really see where he'd fit in personally, so I wouldn't. But
that's fine. Look, game of opinions, right? And then obviously the club have taken up the option on Adi Adiemo, which is great. There definitely seems to be a future for him in some kind of maybe wing back role. I think, that's Kellen's spot when he's fit. And then maybe Addy's his sort of understudy. And I think that was kind of Colin's position as a player as well. So maybe he sees something in Addy that he thinks he can sort of get out there. We'll see. I'm hoping the next time we sit down and have a conversation that there'll be some sort of incomings, or maybe some kits to discuss, or we're in that kind of limbo phase right now. But yeah, I think thanks to everyone that's moved on. I think there's some players I'm excited to see. I really hope we get to see Danny Cashman next season. Definitely think from what I saw in pre-season, there's a good player in there. And it was just such a shame that he got injured. I think what was more disappointing about his injury was that nobody ever really told us how bad his injury was. And then there was just suddenly pictures of him having knee surgery. So that was disappointing. I think there's definitely, we've got a lot of players to kind of come back. There's going to be a lot of new faces because that's the nature of the beast when you're in League Two. Ultimately, as much as we love some of these players, they weren't good enough this season, and that things need to change, and we need 15, 20 goal a season striker. We can't go into the season with just Dorsey. Toby Adiemo became a real fan's favourite towards the end of the season. But again, he wasn't a out-and-out goal scorer. So remains to be seen where that takes us. Apart from that, the only other thing I wanted to mention was a huge thanks to everybody that helped us get the Devil's Own off the ground this year and keep it moving forward. Some of those people want to sit in the background, and that's absolutely fine, but their work does not go unnoticed. Obviously, we launched the fan interviews in the Gillingham game. It's gone really well. I think people enjoy watching them. People enjoy the fact that there's a bit more content out there. We're hoping that it'll have a permanent home at the ground next year. We're sort of working on a place where we can be so people can come and find us as well, so that you don't have to stalk them around the car park, Asa. But yeah, I guess, we await the pre-season fixture list. I guess we'll play Palace at some stage. As we...
well, hopefully we get Three Bridges again, because that'll be a good test now after their...
It'll be a good test, and congratulations to them winning the Sussex Transport Cup last night down at the Amex. That was a huge result for them. It's a strange one because I think we probably will play Three Bridges, because I think it's part of the deal that then we can train on their 4G pitch in the winter. But it's always interesting to watch 4G pitches. I don't always think the bounce is as true as it could be, but look, let's see. There's definitely, pre-season friendly against Worthing would be nice, right? They're coming up into the National League now, so that'd be a good test. You know, I mean, to be fair, Palace do normally bring a decent side. You know, I've seen Eze last year. I remember Eze playing, absolutely destroyed us. But yeah, so I think let's wait and see where we go. You know, get behind the team. Let's see where Colin takes us, what Colin's style is, what Colin's approach is. I think, you know, the scenes last game of the season, you could see what it meant to him to be in with those fans. And there's a lot of managers that wouldn't have done that as well, right? Like stand in the middle of the fans on the pitch. So I think fair play to him. And yeah, we'll continue on. So we've got some exciting guests coming up over the summer. I'm not going to say who or when until they're in the diary. But yeah, we will keep the content coming. Asa's on Instagram and he's on YouTube, and he does all these wonderful things where he talks to us about what's going on. So give him a follow. Like his content. If you like us, give us a like, write a review, subscribe, whatever you need to do. It helps us move up the rankings. So for me, thank you, Asa, for joining me.
Thank you. And before we jump off, I'd just like to give my own thank you. So, Full Kit Archive, aka Bradley, has done this lovely shirt for me with Louis Watson. As we mentioned, was my favourite. So go and give them a follow. Really pleased with that. So thank you for that, Bradley.
Absolute pleasure, Asa. And I will see you very soon. But for now, thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Take care. See you later.